Hello YouTube friends. Recently I've received a lot of requests asking me to share my tips and tricks for raising seahorse fry into juvenile and adult stages. First, I just want to say there are multiple ways to successfully raise fry. What I'm sharing with you are the strategies I use that work for me with my schedule. So there are 10 things that I take into consideration or do when I'm approaching raising seahorse fry. First, I have a tank setup that's appropriate. I recommend anywhere between 5 and 15 gallons. You want to balance for something that will allow you to provide food density when you are feeding the fry versus ease of cleaning. So for example, a 2-gallon tank might be just too tiny to get in and clean. Not only that, the tiny tanks just are not stable. They require huge water changes every day, and that not only creates fluctuations in the water parameters, but essentially you are putting the seahorses in a brand new environment constantly, and that is putting stress on them. Additionally, I use a bare bottom tank. It just makes cleaning so much easier. I recommend you complete some sort of minor cleaning or water change each day to help prevent building up of invisible organic waste, which is really detrimental to seahorses no matter what their age is. Also, having a bare bottom makes it easy to observe the fry and food density and detect any potential issues that might be developing, such as hydroids. It also makes it easy to see what needs to be cleaned up. Another thing I do for the seahorse fry is provide hitching posts at multiple levels. Erectus fry, like I have, are pelagic when they're born. Now at night they do hitch when they're getting ready to go to sleep, but they do like to hang out at the top of the water column. Sometimes they'll go to the lower levels depending on how mature or large the fry are, but they do appreciate having something to hang onto at different levels. Because the fry tank can get polluted pretty quickly, I just keep spares sometimes of the decorations and hitching posts, and I might clean them inside of the tank, or I might just swap them out and put in something brand new and clean. Then clean up the decorations that were inside of the tank, let them air dry, and put them away and get ready for the next swap. One of the things that I think is really important is to have flow in a seahorse fry tank. When you're raising them, that sounds counterintuitive because you want them to be able to get their food. But you would be surprised at how good they are at navigating current and being able to capture food. I recommend a small hang-on-the-back power filter which provides flow in the tank and can house biological and mechanical filtration. I recommend cleaning out the power filter at least once every 2 weeks, maybe every week, depending on your tank's load, how many seahorse fry you have in there. Of course, the intake has to be covered. I use a cylindrical sponge that works not only to prevent food and the fry from getting sucked into the filter, it also works as a secondary biological filter. Having flow in a seahorse fry tank is really important. When you look at some of my fry and they're fighting the current, you think, wow, that current is way too strong. But if you think about in nature, those seahorse fry are constantly fighting currents, and yet some do survive. It actually helps them get stronger. It's kind of like an exercise for them. I do recommend against using a canister filter though. Those tend to be more complex and time consuming to put together, clean, and take apart. It's a lot harder to manipulate the flow. Many hang on the back filters, allow you to adjust the flow some way. Sponge filters can be okay to add extra biological filtration, but I find they're harder to keep clean and can pollute the tank if you don't keep up with the cleaning on them. However, never set up a fry tank with just a sponge filter alone. The fry need flow. Otherwise, you're going to slowly watch them deteriorate because the water becomes too stagnant for them. I also recommend using some sort of protein skimmer on the fry tank. It's very helpful in moving that invisible organic waste that we can't measure. It's one of the parameters that's really important for seahorses in general that we can't measure. A skimmer will remove a lot of those things. It doesn't matter if you have a skimmer that is a power skimmer or if it's air driven, as long as it's covered well and you don't have a problem with fry getting sucked up or pulled into small holes. I tend to put mine on only at night when the fry aren't feeding. On my particular brand, I do put a sponge as a cover for the intake. And I also adjusted the return flow so it doesn't disrupt the water too much for the seahorses because I have such a strong skimmer. I don't want it to be overpowering for the seahorses. Something that I do that is a little bit different than what other people do is I do allow some algae to grow in the tank. It could be on the hitching posts, mainly the back wall. It's not pretty, I will admit that, but it sort of acts as an in-tank algae scrubber. It helps keep the tank water more stable, but I really like it because copepods will embed in there and they'll reproduce and grow. And if you look carefully, the seahorse fry will actually hunt the copepods out of the algae either on the back wall or on the decorations. I'm happy to report my at-home captive bred seahorses are now available online for shipping at ccreef.com. Navigate to the site and select captive bred seahorses or type in the search bar Seahorse to see your options. You can even make requests for saddling, serie, or specific sex or pairs. Once you select what you're interested in purchasing, you can scroll down to see a description and care requirements. You also have different options for payment. Please consider supporting CC Reef and Cowfish Pro. Another thing that is important, especially in the beginning, is to offer live pelagic foods as a main source. You can use rotifers, you can use pelagic copepods, you can use other copepods if you're allowing algae to grow in the tank like I am. I tend to use mostly newly hatched brine shrimp because newly born erectus fry can take to those foods pretty easily. Their mouths are big enough to take it in. And because I feed with newly hatched brine shrimp, I enrich the shrimp to make it even more nutritious. You can enrich with a homemade green water. You can use phytoplankton, you can use spirulina powder or Celcon. I have my own homemade green water recipe that works very well for me. You can find that in my Seahorse Care playlist if you're interested in it. One thing you will not be able to do is just throw in some frozen brine shrimp, baby brine shrimp, or other frozen foods and expect the fry are going to take to it. They really do need to start with live foods, which is one of the reasons trying to grow them out is so time consuming. Just caring for those live foods and hatching them out, or whatever procedure you need to use to make them available to the babies. After the first few days, sometimes I experiment and I start growing out the baby brine shrimp and putting in the tank baby brine shrimp that's 3 to 5 days old. That works very well for the fry as they start getting into the couple week mark. I do continue to enrich them, and in fact, I keep either brine shrimp or enriched brine shrimp vessels going almost constantly. Now, as the seahorses get older, maybe after the first week, you can start adding some frozen, but you have to do so gradually and only tiny amounts. So starting with the baby brine shrimp, you might mix in just a tiny bit of Cyclops, which is a bit more nutritious than the baby brine shrimp alone. The reason you don't want to put a lot in there is you still need to stimulate the seahorse fry feeding response, which is triggered by the movement that they see of the animal in the water column, the baby brine shrimp. If you add a lot of Cyclops, for example, it will pollute the tank. Mix it in with the baby brine shrimp when you're adding a feeding, and then it should be suspended with the current along with the baby brine shrimp. And you'll notice that some of the fry will start experimenting. Floating foods with the live foods are your best bet to spark interest. You'll notice in the beginning when you first start adding some of the frozen foods that the babies will start chasing it. They're curious, they'll stare at it. Then some become brave enough and start sampling it and actually look for it when you add it. When there is more interest in frozen, then slowly increase the ratio of frozen to live. Another suggestion when the seahorses get bigger is trying Calanus, which is a little bit bigger and has a very strong scent, which does attract the seahorses as well. I feed the fry tank anywhere from 2 to 3 times a day, but if I have a late work night, sometimes the fry won't get a midday feeding, and I make it a point of providing a very heavy, dense feeding first thing in the morning, come home, clean up the tank, and then provide another large feeding at night before they go to bed. And that seems to work. And then my final recommendation is just keep things clean. So when you are working on the tank, checking on the babies every day, go ahead and clean those sponges. I usually turn the power filter on high and turn on the protein skimmer in my tank, and then get a bag to surround the sponge and pull off the sponges just as I'm turning off the device. And that captures a lot of things that get trapped in the sponge and prevents it from going right back into the tank. Also, as an alternative, or on different days, you can vacuum the bottom and the sponges, just leave them in place. I also recommend that you scrub or wipe down the tank walls and the floor at least once a week. That gets out any buildup and keeps the tank and the seahorses healthier. As far as the protein skimmer, I recommend cleaning out the cup no less than once a week so that it's functioning at its highest capacity. That's probably your number one trick for keeping up the water quality, is making sure that you don't have a buildup of that organic waste, and that's what your protein skimmer removes. I also recommend on the skimmer doing more of a deep clean in the housing every few months because things do build up inside of there. And again, you want to keep everything functioning as well as possible. In addition to cleaning out inside of the filter, it's a good idea to rinse out the media that you have there using tank water. You don't want to rinse it under cool water. It's going to destroy all of the beneficial nitrifying bacteria that keeps the tank stable. But rinsing it off helps remove extra debris that can pollute the tank while still maintaining a good portion of the nitrifying bacteria. Finally, I recommend rinsing very well any of the foods, whether live or frozen, before adding it to the tank. Brine shrimp, for example, are very dirty as they go through a hatching process. Bacteria builds up very easily, especially in enrichment vessels. Also, the frozen items that you might be adding come with some sort of extra liquid or juice. All of those things just pollute the tank. So rinse very well with some sort of sieve using cool water before adding it to the tank. Well, those are the main things that I do. I don't know if they're really secrets, but as you can see, it's a lot of work. It's a lot to keep up with. Definitely not impossible. I'm actually surprised that I have so many babies surviving. It's fun and tedious at the same time, but it's very rewarding. I hope this video was helpful to you. Thank you so much for the great questions that you've been providing. Take care and hope to see you next time.